Really solid hockey weekend, Paul.
It was 5-1 as a conference in the regionals. Yeah, the teams with expectations got it done. You know, it's not always easy to do, but Michigan and Minnesota were hyped all year, and they proved it in the tournament this weekend.
The two teams that played for the Big Ten championship, both still alive in the run for the national championship. That is our big story. Two teams headed to the Frozen Four. Remember, the games aren't until April 7th, so that is 10 days from now in Boston. Michigan will take on Denver. Minnesota will battle Minnesota State. So the potential is there for a national championship to be a rematch of the Big Ten championship, where they both to win. Let's start with Michigan. They got 7 goals in their regional final win. Just to put that in perspective, that is more goals than were scored in any of the other 3 regional finals combined between the two teams. How impressive was Michigan here?
Really impressive. And I think when they're the most dangerous is when they get scoring from other guys. You know, they had 9 different goal scorers in the 2 games. And, you know, so it wasn't all Beniers and Johnson and Brisson. It was Moyle and some other lower guys. And when they get that, that just puts that much more pressure on the other teams. And, you know, yes, they did get a couple empty net goals. Quinnipiac emptied their net when they got to within 4-3. So Michigan got a couple that way. Brendan Brisson, though, scored a one-timer. Their power play is so good when they're moving that puck around. Thomas Bordelot scored. So when they get contributions all around, it just makes the Stars look even more big.
And to do this against Quinnipiac, who had the best goalie in the country statistically, right? I mean, what does that tell us? I mean, offensively, it's pretty impressive.
It is, and I think it proves a little bit of, you know, the depth of the Big Ten, how good the Big Ten was this year. They can score, they can play defense, they've got good goaltending, but the power of the likes of Minnesota and Michigan, and Michigan's so confident, they didn't look at that as like a, ooh, we got to look and be worried. They looked at it, this is a challenge. We're going to put it on this guy today, and they did.
Oh, when you have 4 of the top 5 picks in the draft, 7
We've kind of chronicled that, right?
Yes, they're a pretty good team, pretty talented roster.
Yep.
What about Eric Portillo? Now, he did give up the 4 goals in the 3rd period. I get that. But, man, early on in this game, there were a lot of chances that he turned away and really put them in a position to take control of the game.
Yeah, it's one of those where you look at the score sheet after and you're like, did he play that well? You know, he did, because it's not about how many saves, it's when you save them and in what moments in the game. He made them early, and then when it was 4-3, he made a couple big saves to kind of calm things down. Then Quinnipiac pulls their goalie really early, about just under 4 minutes left in the game, and Michigan made the one defensive play, got the empty net goal to kind of, you know, calm things down. I think, you know, Ann Arbor was getting a little nervous when it hit 4-3, but he made a couple saves, and then they got the empty nets and going.
Hindsight's 20/20. What did you make of that strategy? It did feel like it was a little bit early.
You know what? It's the feel of every coach. And Rand Pecknold, he's notorious for pulling goalie. He did it in their conference championship game with 6 minutes. It was the game we were watching to see if Ohio State would get into the tournament, because if Quinnipiac would have beaten Harvard, Ohio State would have made the tournament. But he did that there to get it to overtime. If they score, he's a genius. He's a genius coach of the year. You know, they already had the momentum. Yeah, it's just really tough, and it just didn't go their way.
Well, that was what was weird about it to me.
Right.
It was that it felt like they had everything going their way at that point.
They didn't have to be desperate. It didn't seem like needed to. Like if you're not generating any offense, then yes, get that guy. You need to change something up. But they were right there. You know, coaches make their decisions. They get paid the big bucks.
So as it is, Michigan moves on to the Frozen Four for the 26th time. That is the most of any school. Give us an early sense for Michigan against Denver. You called Denver's games this weekend, correct?
I did. Okay. I was in Loveland, Colorado, did their both games. They are a high-octane offense. They like to run and gun. They're the highest-scoring team. Top 2 are there. Denver and Michigan, I think, is 2. Number 1 power play in the country. We saw Michigan's. Theirs is ridiculous, too. They're a top 5. So, you know, I think it's going to be so entertaining. I think goaltending's an interesting thing. Both goalies are natives of Sweden. Both are gigantic men. Portillo's 6'6".
Right.
Krona for Denver is 6'5", both from Sweden. So that's a cool little story. But they're kind of mimic each other. They want to turn the puck over, transition up the ice. They want to play offense. So I think this is going to be a fun, electric game.
And Denver, of course, a great program, 8-time national champion. Michigan hasn't won it since 1993. It's amazing. Marty Turco was their goal.
98. Yes,
98.
Marty Turco,
I'm sorry,
98.
Yeah, 98. Marty Turco in the goal. That is. And that tells you how long ago it was,
years
right?
ago. I mean, it's just, you don't think about then when you say the numbers, you're like, wow, it's been 25 years.
Right, it just shows how old you're getting. How about Minnesota? They rallied to defeat the defending national champ UMass in overtime, and then really manhandled Western Michigan, who was the top seed in that region. So what do you make of their performance this weekend and getting themselves back to the Frozen Four? Yeah,
I thought it was great. To me, they had the toughest bracket of the regionals, the 4 regionals. You know, they're playing, like you said, the defending national champions, and then Western Michigan, who played really well against Michigan earlier in the year, beat them at Yost. So #1 seed in that bracket. They were excellent. And I think it showed Minnesota, a lot of times, their fans can be very finicky. When they get down 3-1, game's over. We're done. It's awful. You know what? That team showed it, and they have certain guys, the Ben Myers, the Brock Fabers, their leadership really showed. Yeah. Kind of no panic, you know, because that's what happens to a team. You get down 3-1. You know the Minnesota Nation is watching this so close, but they don't panic. They have that demeanor. And it showed, and then they caught one little break against Western. Western thought they had tied the game at 1 yesterday, but they reviewed it, and they were offsides by, this much right here, and that's all that mattered. And when that got flipped, they got a goal later in the third, and then the rest was history. So they will look to win it for the first time since 2003. During my college years. And their goalie, Justin Close, I mean, this continues to be really an amazing story, and we have documented how he took over at midseason, but man, he was really good. He was really good. He's really good low because he's not a big guy. His legs are really good. But the story of him is mostly, I think, his demeanor. He came in, and I've said this 100 times, he came in as, hey, I'm the third guy, whatever you need from me, coach. And I think that mentality, now that he's the #1 guy, hasn't changed. He knows where he started. It's corny. You could almost like a Rudy situation where he was never expected to play. He was going to be the third guy. I mean, even if the first guy stumbles, he's not even the next guy in line. So for him to react the way he was, and clearly he's a junior now. He's been practicing with them for 3 years. He's been seeing that. He clearly got better than when they recruited him, and it's showing now. Third shutout in 6 games. Pretty good. Yeah, it's a good way to win. And doing it at the most important time. What about Myers? It feels like he has emerged. Well, I mean, look, he's been a great player all year, but they're kind of riding him a little bit. They are. I mean, he's always been a point producer at about 1 point a game, but he does all the other things. Right now, since he came back, we chronicled that, when he came back from the Olympics, played in that 1 game at Penn State where he had no rest. Who knows the travel was like there. He's had 15 points in their 7 games since back, and he's making all the key plays at the key times. And like I said, the demeanor thing. He's a captain. I think your team follows that kind of sense of calmness and confidence, not cockiness. And I think he's just been that kind of leader, the type of leader that wins championships. And we'll see if they can pull that off. But right now, he's playing at an elite level, and everyone's falling behind him. So Minnesota State is first for them. This is a program that has transitioned through the years, right? It was D3, D2, and now a D1 program. Made the Final Four, Frozen Four for the first time last year, and now back there. Give us a sense for them. And I'm also interested in this rivalry. I mean, is this like Duke, Carolina? It's building to that. Okay. I think Minnesota has a few other rivalries because it's been longer, like you said, with St. Cloud and Minnesota Duluth. Okay. But the more that they've had success, it's kind of like bringing what Minnesota fans are like, okay, wait a second, this team should not be at our level yet, or, as fast and be as consistent. We get all these top recruits. Why aren't we winning the championships and getting to the Frozen Four? So I think now you're going to see a lot of, see some families maybe having some different colored jerseys on, watch, that typical stuff. And then, hockey, state of Minnesota is probably the biggest with hockey. So it's going to bring a lot, that state's going to have a lot of fun with it. And then as far as the game, Mike Hastings, their head coach, was my head coach in junior hockey before I went to college. He's a great coach, and he is tough, and his team is tough. So they're a physical, hard-working team. Minnesota is showing that now, as we've seen, that they can play that type of game, which is going to make it interesting, I think. Higher skill, obviously, the Gophers have. Are they going to be able to do those little things? And Matthew Nyes has been so good for them, too. You know, are they going to be able to get maybe some dirty goals against a tough team that makes you work for everything? And they have a great goaltender in Dryden McKay, so it's going to be a tough one for them.
Overall, does this long layover favor anyone? I mean, I understand why they do it, obviously, to remove it from the men's basketball
Right, it kind of lines up,
Four.
right?
Yeah,
Saturday,
absolutely.
Monday, Thursday, yeah.
But does it favor anyone? Does it help either of these Big Ten teams, or is it kind of just it's the same for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's the same for everyone. Everyone played 2 games, this weekend. Kind of gives you maybe a little, relax for a couple days, get some good home practices before you travel, and then, get out there on Tuesday, media stuff. Get you set. And these guys train like, every sport now. These guys are so prepared physically. It's more of probably, good couple days to enjoy this instead of popping right back out there and then get back to work, probably tomorrow for a lot of the teams. So it's going to be fun. And very good chance, I don't get people too excited now, but very good chance that you could see a rematch. Game 6, would it be, for Minnesota and Michigan? And
would be pretty cool, huh?
It's right there.
Yes.
Definitely.
So the potential for an all Big Ten national championship exists. You'll be chronicling it for us
I will be traveling to Boston.
Excellent.
I think myself and Dan Kelly will be there. So Dan's going to have to put on his reporter cap instead of his play-by-play. I'm going to have to settle him down, I think, at certain times. Like, Dan, we're reporting. We're not doing the call here. Oh, he probably might do it while we're watching the game. Maybe we'll just do a fake one.
He's got some good pipes.
He does.
He does. Great stuff. Paul Caponegri, really appreciate it. And Autumn, let's start with the game against South Dakota. Really kind of scrapped it out. This was a back-and-forth game. Neither team led by more than 6 points and really just kind of came down to the wire. What did you take away from Michigan's win?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, credit to South Dakota. I mean, they've been on an incredible Cinderella run, and this was a perfectly matched game with both of them. They sized up with them well. So far, South Dakota has been able to neutralize their bigs, but Naz Hillman, I mean, she's Naz Hillman. She's an All-American for a reason. She came out and she needed to do what needed to be done on both ends. I love what she brought in the paint, despite the triple team, quadruple team at sometimes, but going up against Hannah Shervin, she was able to commit her into early foul trouble. I really like what Michigan is doing right now as far as like continuing their dominance in the paint. And then Layla Filia, as a freshman, stepping up and hitting that huge shot down the stretch. She attacked the lane. She was a secondary option in that frame, but she took it in. She didn't look like a freshman in that moment, and she was able to put Michigan up top. But I'm seeing a complete unit at this point, and they're hungry for a championship.
Give us a little perspective here. I mean, it's amazing to think. We talk a lot on the football side, actually, about kind of, hey, success isn't always linear. Like, just because you go from the bottom of the Big Ten to the middle doesn't mean you're then going to win it and then go to the college football playoff. There's kind of ebbs and flows to it. This has been very linear for Kim Barnes-Arico, right? I mean, you're kind of a second-round program, and then you make it to the Sweet 16 for the first time ever, and then you make it to the Elite Eight for the first time ever, and now maybe you try to make it to a Final Four as well. But what does it say about the job that she has done kind of steadily building this program?
I mean, when you just run through that resume itself, I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And it's incredible to witness, too. We've been covering them all season, but I think Kim Barnes-Arico said it the best, that only 6 teams are left in this entire tournament, in this entire nation, and we're one of them. And I think that's really special because they're the only Big Ten team on the men's and women's side left standing to compete for a national championship. We started off with 68 teams. There were a lot of teams that didn't even get into this tournament. So many people don't get this opportunity, but that's credit to the entire program just enduring adversity, with Leah Brown out during crucial games. You look at how their season panned out late down the stretch, but if you had those, your key piece in there, if you had that game that was made up, you would have been right there, but they've been able to endure that and punch right back. And that just says a lot about Kim Barnes-Arico, the way she's been able to impact this program, not only to go back to Sweet 16 appearances, which you fell in overtime last year. So that's credit to them as well. But now to make it to the Elite Eight, you have a great chance to do it against a Louisville team that you played against before, and you know how you need to attack them this time around. I mean, it's incredible to think. Like Michigan, they had 5 tournament appearances when she first came in, and now she's added 5 more to their resume, including 4 straight. She's put Michigan on the maps for women's basketball for sure.
Oh, that's amazing. And yeah, just to reiterate that, I mean, 5 tourneys ever, and now they've been to 5 of the last 9. So it is incredible. As you hinted at, though, they're playing a Louisville team which kind of manhandled them earlier this year. Give people a sense of kind of what went wrong in that game for Michigan. It just felt like Louisville absolutely swarmed them defensively.
Yeah, Louisville is not an easy task, and I don't think they'll be easy this come around either, but now you know how to attack them. Louisville has one of the best pressure defenses in the entire nation. They're ranked number 18, so that says a lot about this team, and they've been able to hold that consistency throughout this entire season, but that's something that Coach Jeff Waltz instills in his program. That's their identity, and like you mentioned, they did get manhandled, forced 24 turnovers, had 32 points off of those turnovers, finished with 15 steals overall. I mean, this is a quick and very disruptive team. Like, they're not the biggest, they're not the tallest, but they use their speed to their advantage, and they're holding opponents to 55 points per game. So I just think Michigan has to come out and make sure that they take care of every possession, and also come out quick, because they held Michigan also to only 15 points in that first half. They held Naz Hillman, who we know is dominant and has 20 plus games. She only had 12 in that matchup, and she was the lead scorer for the entire Michigan team. Emily Kaiser came right behind her with 10 points, but they also won the battle of the boards. So, Naz Hillman is very effective off the glass. Emily Ingsler, she was able to hold down both of those respective regards on the boards and also getting major steals. But those are 2 key factors that I'm looking at. And I just spoke to Naz Hillman right after their win against South Dakota, and she was telling me, like, hey, this was a learning lesson for us. Like, we learned our identity in that game, and then also we solidified our roles in that game. So I think we're going to see a different Michigan team. This is not this team that we saw back in December.
I've been playing great. I mean, look, they've won 7 of their last 8 against ranked teams, and there's no reason to think that they can't make it 8 of 9. But again, it is a formidable foe, as you said, and one that held them to a season-low point total when they met earlier this year. So 3 other Big Ten teams were in the Sweet 16. They all lost this weekend: Maryland, Indiana, Ohio State. Let's start with Maryland against Stanford. It just seemed like the size was too much for them to deal with, and got off to a rough start and just kind of never recovered.
And the size for Stanford doesn't end. I mean, they have 17 people overall, and they continuously put people in that lineup that adds more depth to them, more length to them, more athleticism. So Stanford came out and they punched really quick. They look like the defending champs as of right now, and they're on a hot streak at this point. But I really think for that first quarter, that hurt Maryland. They got in foul trouble. Diamond Miller got fouled out in that stretch. But then you saw like an aha moment in the fourth quarter that they went on a scoring rampage. They outscored Stanford 30-13 in that matchup, and Angel Reese had 15 of those points. It was just we have nothing to lose type of mentality. And I feel like if they didn't dig themselves in that early hole, that would have been a completely different ball game. And also, you mentioned that size. I mean, Cameron Brink down there, and also Fran Believy, and everyone that they rotate in that system, they were able to out-rebound Maryland. They held Owusu and Diamond Miller, who's been on a scoring rampage, together, combining 40-plus points. They combined for only 15 points in that matchup. And then also Katie Benson, we know her to be a 3-point assassin. She was held scoreless. So I think we just overall saw the better team in Stanford in that matchup. But I mean, Maryland cannot hold their heads. I mean, the way they endured adversity as well, it says a lot about their fight throughout the entire season.
So many ups and downs to that year, and it's just a shame, as you said, dug such a big hole and did play well down the stretch, but couldn't get out of it. The flip side for Indiana against UConn, playing in the state of Connecticut, got off to a really good start. What went wrong, in your opinion, for the Hoosiers after that?
Oh, Dave, I was pulling for Indiana too. I really thought they were going to get that upset right there. And I had them in my bracket because I love the defense that Indiana was playing. But somehow, some way, that defense did not contain UConn's third quarter run. They went on a 16-0 run, paced by Paige Beckers and Kristen Williams. And Paige Beckers, she's coming off an injury and she's playing her best basketball that we've seen since she's been out. Also with Aaliyah Edwards. Like, this is a sophomore duo that is playing their best basketball when it counts the most, and they're stepping up in that regard, and they outscored Indiana in that third quarter, and they just weren't able to recover from there. I also think the offensive boards hurt them in that regard too. 15-2 overall. So that's where UConn is at its best, when they work off the glass, when they're effective off the glass. They're unstoppable, and you gave them, second chance opportunities to put up more shots than them. I think that third quarter, the way they came out of the halftime, hurt them as well.
Again, we talked about the great job Kim Barnes-Arico has done. I mean, Terry Morin, they had won one NCAA tournament game ever before she took over, and now you're talking Elite Eight, Sweet 16, back-to-back years. Awfully impressive as well. Finally, Ohio State lost by 3 to Texas. What kept the Buckeyes from moving on?
Yeah, they were right in that one, but I think it was a great job starting off, getting Rory Harmon, their point guard, in foul trouble early. But then just trying to find a way to contain her at the end didn't go so well. She came out and scored when it mattered the most. She hit 2 crucial free throws down the stretch. And then also the senior and Joanne Allen Taylor stepped up huge and had about 17 points for their team, constantly attacking off the dribble. But I saw down the stretch, I really would have loved that foul from either, like a Taylor Mixell, or they were trapping the ball up top. That could have ran some time off the clock, and it slipped away from them because Rory Harmon got in transition, was able to burn some time off the clock. But, she just hit the shots when it counted the most. In Ohio State, they had one more chance for a final bucket, and it had to be a 3. Just that Texas defense, like we saw it on full display, that was able to shut them down, and they couldn't find an open look. But Ohio State, they weren't even in this tournament last year. To see them fight back and say, hey, we're here. I really love that from this team. And also the duo between Taylor Mixell and JC Sheldon, they were incredible. They hit some huge threes. JC Sheldon was on attack mode, and she stepped up huge for her team. So again, all of these teams that are out, for them to make it to the Sweet 16, like, they cannot hang their heads. They had an incredible season, and I love what I saw from them in this tournament. And
have 3 top players who could all come back next year, and to do it without Madison Green. It's a great story this year, to your point, just falling a little bit short. Autumn Johnson, enjoy Minneapolis and the Final Four, and we will hope that the Wolverines make their way there to join you. As you may have heard, the Big Ten's NCAA tourney on the men's side is over. A record-tying 9 teams got in. None made it past the Sweet 16, with only Michigan and Purdue making it that far. First time in 5 years, the Big Ten didn't at least get a team in the regional final. Among several issues, the league struggled to shoot the ball, less than 42% collectively from the field, just under 28% from 3. Andy Katz is here to put it all into perspective for us. Andy, what do you make of the Big Ten falling short of expectations?
So I have stuck my neck out and gladly done it for the Big Ten Network for a reason, because I believe this. 2 things can be true. You can have a great regular season, which the Big Ten did, and deserve 9 teams, and have a poor performance in the NCAA tournament. They both can be true. Yeah. And I'm going to preach this to the last breath, okay? What happens in March has nothing to do with what will happen the following March. So 2 seasons in a row, the Big Ten has underperformed in the NCAA tournament. That has nothing to do with how many teams they'll get next year. They could get 10, 12, all 14. It wouldn't matter.
They should get all 14.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion.
It won't matter because you earn the berths during the regular season.
Right.
The SEC, they had a really good year. 6 teams. They had a couple number 1 teams. They didn't get anyone in the Final Four. Arkansas was their only team in the Elite Eight. It's a matchup-driven 1-game tournament. We're not suddenly going to say that the MAC, with 2 A's, had a great year because St. Peter's got to the Elite Eight.
Yes.
So both things can be true. I'm not trying to give excuses for the poor performance, and we can go over, we can break that down. But They deserve 9 bids. End of story, full stop, period.
I think where I bristle is the notion that, oh, well, the Big Ten always underperforms in the NCAA tournament. That's kind of the line you hear. And that is not true.
No.
Right? So the last 2 years, the Big Ten has underperformed. Like, there were 3 teams this year that underperformed their seed. In other words, like, if you look at where they were seeded and what round that would project to go to, 3 underperformed, only 1 overperformed. Right? Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois underperformed. Michigan, the only one that overperformed. Purdue, I mean, if you're a 3 seed, you're expected to get to the Sweet 16, right? And presumably the 1 versus 2 would play in the regional final. So that's bad. I mean, 3 underperforming, only 1 overperforming. But I would say this, like, you go back to when Michigan State won its last national title, the last one for the Big Ten in 2000. Going into this year, the Big Ten was tied for the most Final Four teams in that span with the ACC. Each had 14. Now, obviously, the ACC has 2 this year. So the notion the Big Ten never does well in the tournament, it's just flat out wrong. I mean, again, tied for the most Final Four teams. The difference is none had won the national championship, and the ACC had 9 win it in that stretch. So the national championship drought is real. But the notion that kind of, oh, they always flame out early, they don't always flame out.
No.
It has happened last 2 years.
In the ACC, you're talking about Duke and Carolina, now Virginia. I'm not including Syracuse. They weren't in the ACC when they won.
Right.
Okay, just like we're not necessarily going to claim Maryland from, 2002.
No, that one doesn't count for the Big Ten. Yeah.
Well, all right, so 05, Illinois had a great chance to win it against Carolina. In 15, Wisconsin was right there to beat Duke. I think they were the better team in 14. There's no question that, people forget that Michigan State beat one of the best Duke teams ever with Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett to get to the Final Four with Cassius Winston.
Michigan, Louisville.
Michigan played for the title twice. Now, they didn't play as well against Villanova the second time.
Right.
But, and by the way, that Louisville title was vacated, but whatever. So, yes, they've had multiple teams that have played for it, had a chance, weren't able to close the deal. It's the same narrative with Gonzaga, to be honest, that, oh, they always flame out. Well, wait a minute. They played for 2 of the last 4 national championships and have been #1 seed 5 times. So both things can be true. And, I talked to, for example, Jim Phillips, former athletic director at Northwestern, now the commissioner at the ACC, and I talked to him yesterday. He says he has no problem with the amount of teams the ACC got. Just because the ACC, while we were talking yesterday, they had a chance to get 3 teams in the Final Four. Miami lost to Kansas here in Chicago. That didn't change the narrative of what the ACC did during the regular season. He's not suddenly saying, Wake Forest, robbed, they should have been in. No. He said, they got what they deserved. And so did the Big Ten. So both things can be true.
And, of course, Jim Phillips is someone who has served on that committee, and so he understands kind of the mathematics behind it and understands.
He was actually supposed to be the chair before he went to the
Yes, right. Would have been the selection chairman this year. So, no, I think we're in agreement, but I also think it's indisputable the Big Ten has underperformed the last 2 years.
Yes.
Right? Like, you can't say that this is acceptable or what it should have been, right? I mean, obviously the Big Ten should have done better than it did. And again, 3 underperform, 1 overperforms. But it's not, I think what your point is and what my point is that's about this year. That is about 1 year. And it's not some sort of broad, sweeping indictment of the conference in general.
Yeah, I mean, to your point of what the stats you just showed, I think as we take a little bit of a 30,000-foot view here, point guard play has to improve.
Guard play was not good in general.
Yeah, I would say if you look
100%,
at the teams that have advanced,
yes.
Carolina got there because R.J. Davis and Caleb Love played really well. Obviously, Colin Gillespie for Villanova is playing exceptional. Suddenly, Remy Martin is playing great for Kansas.
Where did that come from?
Jeremy Roach for Duke. Guard play. Go back to the teams that we just talked about. Cassius Winston from Michigan State. D. Brown and Darren Williams from Illinois.
Trey Burke
from Michigan. Trayvon Jackson was a solid point guard for Wisconsin in those runs. That is a major issue. I'm not saying Wisconsin would have won that region or this region in the Midwest, but Chucky Hepburn was arguably one of the better point guards this season. He goes down, and they completely, changed the narrative for that game against Iowa State. We're going to talk about Purdue. That's a problem. Illinois, they could never settle. If Andre Curbelo was Andre Curbelo, that would have been different. Ohio State never really had a true point guard. Iowa, you could make that same point. Indiana, to some degree. So I think those were issues for these teams.
Hard to disagree with that. I mean, to me, I think one of the things that's been interesting in a sort of aberrational sort of way these last few years in the Big Ten is that unlike the rest of college basketball, the Big Ten has been driven by its big men here these last couple of years. And that is atypical. There have been some great big men. I mean, incredible big men in this league. But typically in March, guards win you games. And I think it's indisputable. Big Ten just has not been up to snuff there. I guess I would just say, like, kind of your point off the top is, hey, both these things can be true. My point is, it can be true that it's disappointing this year, and that last year was disappointing. Last year was such a weird year.
Yes.
And so I think it's tough to read too much into that, although it was a weird year for everyone. Everyone's dealing with the same circumstances, and some teams did better with it than others did. But to me, this just isn't some sort of like there's something broken with Big Ten basketball.
Well, here's the thing. The Naismith Award will be handed out this weekend in New Orleans. All-American list has 3 Big Ten players. Now, none of them are playing in the Final Four. In fact, only one Naismith finalist is playing. That's Ochai Agbaji from Kansas. So the Big Ten clearly had a great year. If you've got 3 first-team All-Americans, you had a great regular season. You didn't have a great postseason. So, that has to be fixed. But, in the big picture, they have done their job to that point. The other thing I just want to throw out, it's never going to change with this Sunday final. For some reason, that narrative's out there. Iowa underperformed because they played on a Sunday. Well, hey, Richmond played on a Sunday. They played 4 games in the A-10. We talked about this last week.
Yes.
And the Big Ten is never going to give up that window on CBS leading into the selection show. So let's just stop that.
Right.
Like, that's still going to happen.
Yeah, Richmond played on a Sunday and had to win that game, right? Iowa didn't have to win that game. I mean, you think about the game pressure that was on Richmond. They weren't going to make the tournament if they didn't win the A-10. So, no, I'm with you. Again, I think it's easy to kind of fall into the narrative trap. Again, I think a lot of this would be silenced were the Big Ten to just win a national championship.
Yes.
I mean, you don't hear about how bad ACC football is because Clemson wins national championships. The ACC has been bad in football. I mean, it really has been, other than one team. But no one really talks about that because that one team has been so good. And, and I think that therein lies...
That's a great comparison.
Therein lies the challenge. I think you silence all this if someone makes a run to a national championship next year. And it's a shame it didn't happen this year because, again, I do think that there were some teams that were capable of doing it.
Well, and to your point, the new Big East has, they've had a solid time, but because Villanova has won 2 national championships, that has elevated that league, among others, because they won 2 titles by the same team.
Right. Wrapping things up on Big Ten today. Big news out of Northwestern. Congratulations to Veronica Burton, named the Defensive Player of the Year by the Women's Basketball Coaches Association. She's a 3-time Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, and she wins the national award as well. Really a fabulous player, ton of fun to watch. Some notable departures on the men's side already in the Big Ten. E.J. Liddell, Ron Harper Jr., Gabe Brown, Devontae Jones, all going pro. And then some guys headed to the portal. Ryan Young from Northwestern, Sam Sessoms, Penn State, Rob Finney, Parker Stewart from Indiana, Isaiah Thompson. That happened literally while our show was on the air. So by the time we get to the re-airs, there could be more. I mean, that's just kind of the way it...
And his brother's on the staff.
It works. You just flat out never know. A ton of uncertainty this time of year, Andy.
All right, so what I want to do is I want to group teams on where I project them here in late March, where they could be next season. We know there's going to be tons of changes in the portal, still with the NBA draft. And I'm assuming here, Dave, certain big names that have not declared will do so, obviously. Johnny Davis, Keegan Murray.
Right.
So I wanted to group teams in where I think they could be next season. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So let's take a look at the first group.
Okay. And so these are the guys whose decisions you think will dictate whether or not these teams max it out. Okay.
So this is, to me, at this point, could be the first tier of teams we're going to talk about next season as the top teams in the Big Ten.
Okay.
But a lot will have to depend on what does Max Christie do. I think he should come back. He could be obviously a first-team All-Big Ten player. Moussa Diabate, he's certainly tantalizing because of his skill set for the NBA, but does he come back and become the focal point?
Caleb Houston, too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Chris Murray, because I'm assuming Keegan Murray,
right.
but Chris Murray could be the star for Iowa next season, and they could still be very good. Andre Cabello, that's the big question for Illinois. So much talent. What happens with him? Does he lead Illinois back? I'm assuming Kofi.
I'm not assuming Kofi's gone.
All right, well, I have to make that assumption.
Okay.
And then Zach Edey, he has to come back, but does he? And what do they do with him? So, to me, those are like sort of the big names on those schools. I know I didn't include Kofi, but for now, I have to assume that he's going to go. But what I'm curious first, as those are the potential top teams in the Big Ten, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think that's the logical kind of tiering there. I don't know. I mean, I think Kofi Cockburn is the single most fascinating case that we will have seen early in NIL, just to get a sense of what a difference that could make. I mean, there is certainly money out there for him if he wants to turn pro, but there's money in staying as well. But I agree with everyone you brought up again. And this is whether they go pro, whether guys transfer. I mean, you just don't know. And
yeah, the question is, could he make as much money or more NIL at Illinois than he would as a second-round draft pick, if he's even a second-round draft pick, or if he goes overseas? So now, Tier 2. Okay, these teams obviously could move up. We'll have to wait and see. We didn't know where Wisconsin was going. I got Wisconsin again here. Chucky Hepburn, you would assume he comes back, but you never know.
Right.
But he could be a first-team All-Big Ten player as one of the best point guards for the Badgers. But losing Johnny Davis is significant. Hepburn and Wall would be the go-tos. Ohio State, we know Malachi Branham could be a first-round draft pick, but we don't know that yet. But if he comes back, he's a first-teamer potentially for Ohio State. Losing Liddell is significant. And then Indiana, I'm going to assume, again, we don't know if Trace Jackson Davis is going to come back, but I'm going to assume he goes.
Right.
And Jordan Geronimo really came on late, and he could be a significant player for Indiana.
Yeah, I like that grouping. Makes a ton of sense. I mean, you put Wisconsin in Tier 2 at your own peril.
Yes,
right?
I know that.
Because they always seem to be an upper-tier team in the Big Ten. I just kind of feel like they will figure it out. Malachi Branham, to me, is the most interesting, right? Because he absolutely, I mean, you see him in the first round of a lot of draft boards. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. All right, take us through the Tier 3.
All right, so Tier 3. So first of all, Tier 2, those guys could obviously all move up. Tier 3, this group is really interesting to me because Cliff Amore, I think he's going to be an absolute stud for Rutgers, and he needs to stay, obviously. At Maryland, Julian Reese, I think he can be the next big man now for Kevin Willard that steps up. Northwestern, Boo Buie, obviously, he needs to stay for the Wildcats. You just saw Isaiah Thompson. P.J. Thompson's on the staff. Taylor Battle's on the Northwestern staff. So no assumptions here.
You never know, right? Yeah.
Jamison Battle, I think, is going to be a star from Minnesota, but they lost so much. Jalen Pickett, he can come back. And, a transfer from Siena. So if he does, that's a good anchor for Micah Shrewsbury. And then Derek Walker certainly can come back for Nebraska. They need to have him be an anchor for the Huskers.
I was really surprised by the Sam Sessoms decision.
Yes.
I just felt like he could be, along with Pickett, that they had a good foundation. You just never know with these young people. But, yeah, I mean, I agree with everyone you put on there. I mean, I think all those teams probably have a few guys that they could build their foundation around. And then for all of them, it's going to be what do they add in the portal.
Yeah, the portal will be very active for Big Ten teams here in the spring.
No